Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio broadcast on the beautiful AM radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Thank you so much for joining me this week. A reminder for all my radio broadcast listeners, you can always catch the Geek Therapy Radio podcast 5 nights a week. I do 5 uploads per week. It's not necessarily nights. Usually the upload schedule is nights. So you can count on a podcast upload Sunday through Thursday, because Sunday I upload the podcast of the broadcast. You can find the podcast in your favorite podcast app. Of course, we here at iHeartMedia prefer the iHeartRadio app. But if you've got an Apple device or you got an Android device and you've got your favorite podcast player on there, just search for Geek Therapy Radio. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme. That's very important, and that's me. That's Geek Therapy Radio with your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Also, you can go to geektherapyradio.com to contact me directly, or you can email me, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. That's geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. And all of the Geek Therapy Radio socials. So Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of that good stuff. Again, just look out for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. That's Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger. Okay, moving on. If you are a subscriber to the podcast, I have been talking about this all week. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 has landed. Actually, I shouldn't say has landed, because for a lot of people, including myself, a lot of us are having problems downloading the game, let alone installing the game. It's hard for many of us to download the game. I am lucky, blessed, whatever you want to call it, that I do have Flight Simulator running on my desktop PC at home, my home workstation with the Ryzen 9 3900X, 12 cores, 24 threads, 32 gigs of RAM, GTX 980 graphics card. It is 5 years old. It's a 5-year-old graphics card, but I do have it running at home. I have been trying all week, well, at least since Tuesday, to get it to download to my laptop. It's kind of this hit or miss thing that's going on with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, where some people are able to download it, some people aren't. In my case, I've downloaded it on the desktop, still having trouble right now. As I'm recording right now, I've got my laptop right behind me, still trying to download all of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So in this first segment, obviously I'm talking about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 to bring my radio listeners, my terrestrial broadcast radio listeners, up to speed with my thoughts on 2020. So right off the bat, we have that the download is glitchy. If and when you are able to fully download the game and have it installed on your PC, the game itself, it goes without saying, all the hype you've heard, all the reviews you've read, everything you've heard about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 being revolutionary, state-of-the-art, unlike anything we've ever seen before in video game history, is 100% true. It is jaw-dropping. Absolutely staggering. It is the most incredible game that human beings have ever created, in my humble opinion. Every square inch of the world is mapped in intricate detail. There are some little glitches here and there, but that's pretty much par for the course, especially for any initial release, initial launch of a game. Glitches are going to happen. It's just going to be one of those things that's constantly addressed in updates. But the game itself, by and large and on the whole, is awesome and awesomely playable and looks great. So remember I said I have a GTX 980. That's my graphics card. That's from 2015. It's a 4 gigabyte GTX 980. Microsoft Flight Simulator automatically detects the hardware in your system and says, we think based on your hardware that these settings will work best for you. And so for me, it's at medium settings. And I will tell you, by and large, it's at medium settings. There's more settings in this game than you can shake a stick at. But it sets everything default for medium for me, and it looks gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. It looks true to life, even at medium settings. It is jaw-dropping. Flying it, I am a long time flight simulator enthusiast, all the way back since I was a little boy in the 90s, and I've dabbled with the flight simulators as far back as 1982. I wasn't alive in 1982. I was born in 1983, but you get what I'm saying. I've played old versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator even before Microsoft bought Flight Simulator. I have enough experience with Flight Simulator that I was very excited for Flight Simulator 2020. And I will say, if you are a flight simulator enthusiast, especially a Microsoft Flight Simulator enthusiast, there is a learning curve for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 if you're coming from legacy Flight Simulator, so Flight Simulator X or Flight Simulator 2004 or what have you. But the learning curve, it's the best learning curve possible. It's because everything is so intricately real, you have to basically reevaluate how you interact with the aircraft. It is all 3D modeled. I swear you can see dust on knobs and dust on the dashboard. It's crazy. So the learning curve is now you, instead of a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts, yes, you can do keyboard shortcuts, but for the most part, they are different in Flight Simulator 2020. I give the example that full throttle is no longer F4. F4 doesn't do full throttle. You have to actually manually push the throttle up with F3, decrease the throttle with F2, but F1 is still kill the throttle. Just F4 is not full throttle. That's just one example of how hotkeys have changed in Flight Simulator 2020. So the learning curve is there, but it's not entirely a bad thing. It's so worthwhile to get yourself up in the air, so to speak, up to speed, so to speak, in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, to recap on the way out of this segment, should you buy Microsoft Flight Simulator? Well, that depends who you are. I was able to go into more detail about this in the podcast, obviously, but should you buy Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020? If you are a simulation enthusiast, yes, absolutely. I would say it's a mandatory buy if you are a geek about any type of thorough simulation. If you are passingly interested in Microsoft Flight Simulator, add it to your wish list on Steam and wait for it to go on sale. There are arcadey type modes, but I don't think the arcadey type modes will be enough in the long run to hold your interest. If you've heard about Microsoft Flight Simulator so much, but you're not interested in simulation at all, I think you can skip it. If you're not into simulation, obviously there's not going to be anything there to catch your interest. But if you're into airplanes, aviation at all, yes, get Microsoft Flight Simulator and click on the learn to fly modes, and it is incredible. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio broadcast. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. I always feel like I'm so constrained on the radio because we have these brackets around every segment. The first segment, 8 minutes. Second segment, 10 minutes. Third segment, 11 minutes. Fourth segment, 10 minutes. I have to meet those bookends on each end of the segment, and I feel like, especially with the subject matter that we cover, we're all geeks about something. There's a whole lot to geek out about in this world. And the 39 minutes of total airtime of Geek Therapy Radio on the radio, it feels limiting. I'm very grateful for it. Of course, one of my dreams was to have my own broadcast radio show that comes out of an actual antenna pulsating electromagnetic waves through the universe. It's a romantic notion. I'm following the footsteps of my father a little bit, even though he said, "Son, don't get into radio. It is not what it used to be when I was coming up." My dad, for anybody listening in Houston, Texas, who remembers this name, my father was Alan Hamburger. Live at 5, Channel 13 for 10 years. Sheriff Fryer, Alan Hamburger, Bob Allen, Marvin's in their slime in the ice machine. Alan Hamburger was my father. He was later replaced with Art Rascon. Art Rascon is an awesome guy, and he is still there at Channel 13. But yeah, my dad, from 1989 through 1999, Channel 13 live at 5. When I expressed my interest in getting into radio, I didn't know that this segment would turn into this. Sometimes I don't know what the segments are going to turn into, but Dad, I was thinking about getting into radio. He was just like, his heart dropped you would think that he would, part of him, I think part of what he was feeling was, I guess, honored that one of his 4 sons, was going to get into broadcasting. But my dad was always all about the realities. He was always about, in his words, the realities. And the realities were basically what he would say. You can play guitar all you want. I can encourage you to play guitar all you want, but you're going to need to get a job to pay the bills. The realities are that you are going to need to pay the bills. Do all the art you want, but you're going to have to pay the bills, and you're going to have to do something realistic and practical to pay the bills. So when I told him I want to get into radio, that was not a realistic and practical way that he believed one could pay the bills post Y2K in mass communications, in 1,000 channels on TV and high-speed internet, and this is even podcasts were a thing. And granted, I do use the radio show. I halfway joke about this, that Geek Therapy Radio on the actual radio, 950 KPRC AM here in Houston. The radio show is promotion for the podcast. So I'm realistic about that. I got a job in radio. I work full time at the sister station, KTRH. I run the board over there, and they gave me the radio show here on KPRC back in 2017. So I'm very happy to do it. As I went on through my career, my dad passed away in 2013. But as he saw me kind of making my way in radio, and he saw that I was actually into it and everything, he did radio locally in California, for at least 1 year before he passed away. He went back to his roots, local public radio where was it? In San Diego on the beach, I forget, Dana Point, where he hosted for a few hours a night a blues radio show where he would just sit in the little studio looking out through the glass at the Pacific Ocean, playing B.B. King and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Buddy Guy, basically playing his collection of music. He didn't get paid for it. He did it pro bono. I think it was like a public radio station. It was run by a bunch of college kids. Basically rolled up in there. He has 35, 40 years of broadcast experience. Said, guys, can you give me, what do you think about giving me an hour on Friday night or 2 hours on Friday night just to play the blues? That was kind of you could tell in those old broadcasts. Maybe I'll see if I can find some audio of it. My dad went through his entire career. He was a reporter for Entertainment Tonight back in the 80s, going all these Hollywood parties. He brought me to those Hollywood parties as a baby, the cast of MASH, oogling and ogling me in little bissonette, squeezing my cheeks at these Hollywood parties. And so he had a good career in broadcasting. So winding up back at his roots just for one more year, pro bono, doing AM radio, playing the music that he loved on his own terms. Man, what a way to go. He wound up moving across the country to Cape Cod for the final year of his life. He bought a house up there, and it was evident that he was trying to get it ready to leave to his family. There's some speculation. I don't know how deep I want to get into it, but his dream was always that he could retire to Cape Cod. He grew up in Cape Cod, grew up in Boston, that he would retire to Cape Cod and leave a house or a cottage or something on Cape Cod to his family. Without getting too deep into the speculation, knowing who my dad was, and if you're a Houston native and you're wanting some real behind the scenes of local Houston celebrities, I guess, this is some juicy stuff here on Geek Therapy Radio, KPRC 950 AM. We kind of speculate, and it will forever remain a mystery, that maybe my dad was diagnosed with cancer. For anybody who knew him, he was not a lifelong smoker. He started smoking in Vietnam. He smoked quite a bit. He passed away when he was 65. And so we wonder, what if he was diagnosed with cancer, and just knowing who he was, not wanting to bother anybody with his problems, maybe he kind of the doctor told him, and maybe he didn't tell us. Maybe. We speculate, which would explain why he moved to Cape Cod, did the thing he did on the radio for the last year, and then moved to Cape Cod to set up the house. He had always said that was a dream of his, and it was kind of strange that all of a sudden he just kind of pulled the trigger and started to do it. The gist of the story is that, did he know something about his health that we didn't know? And just looking at my dad for the last couple years of his life, he was getting skinny. It all kind of adds up to he was diagnosed with something and just didn't want to burden us, but wanted to leave us with something. We didn't find out that he had passed away, for a couple days after he actually did. And the first red flag was that this was during the playoffs. This was October, I believe, 2013. This was during the playoffs. Red Sox were in the playoffs. My dad was in Cape Cod. My dad's from Boston. We were all raised Red Sox fans, of course, also Astros fans, being in Houston here. But we weren't getting texts when usually during Red Sox playoff games, all four of my brothers and my father were all texting each other after each play of the game or after the game. During the game, we were texting each other. But it was in game whatever of the playoffs, and it was just my four brothers texting each other, and my dad wasn't piping up. And we're just like, hey, Pops, what do you think about that last play or whatever? Because we hadn't heard from him. And so we just figured, oh, well, it's later on the East Coast. Maybe he just kind of fell asleep, didn't think much about it. But after the second night, the next game, and my dad didn't pipe up, we thought, okay, something might be actually wrong here. And that's when we called the police department in Cape Cod to do a welfare check. My dad had passed away in Cape Cod. Apparently, after playing a round of golf, he was sitting on the couch and he took a nap after playing a round of golf in Cape Cod. He died exactly. This is almost English poet, American pioneer poet type stuff. Dying in the forest just like you want to. He passed away in Cape Cod. The house wasn't quite ready yet. We wound up selling the house because at that point, he didn't quite finish it. And it was way more of a burden to us than it was any sort of asset. So we wound up getting rid of the house. Didn't know I was going to go into all that. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. We'll be right back with more. Let's talk about some actual geekiness. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've, of course, got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I like to tell stories on Geek Therapy Radio from time to time. It's nice to reminisce. Sometimes it's that's a better word. It's therapeutic to reminisce sometimes. What I will wrap up with from the last segment, telling the last years of my father and how I got into radio broadcasting myself. Despite his warnings that I financially I probably shouldn't, and to some degree, I definitely know what he's talking about. That being said, if you'd like to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, just email me, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com, or just go to geektherapyradio.com and contact me, or call up the iHeart station here. And if you got a hobby shop, or you're selling electric cars or cool cars or anything, we're all geeks about something. This could be business. If you're a fabricator, CNC, all that stuff is perfectly up Geek Therapy Radio's alley. We're all geeks about something, which means a whole lot of businesses fall under this umbrella. Do you sell video games? Oh my gosh, I would love to promote a video game shop. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Sorry for all the pitching here, but yeah, seriously, halfway seriously, if you want to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, want me to promote your business, let's talk. No vape shops. Don't even think about it. Anyways, something that's coming to mind here is for whatever reason it's popping up. You think about childhood, you think about how you're raised, you think about what you're exposed to as a child. And for some reason, I'm thinking of old computers. Now, obviously, those of you who listen to the podcast regularly listen to Geek Therapy Radio, you know I'm all about vintage computers. It's one of my geek passions. I am perhaps too excited that I've got my old Compaq Desk Pro 286E up and running. When's the last time you used a 286 computer? 1989? Like any normal person? Well, I've got one up and running, and it is glorious. I've got it plugged into an actual CRT monitor, CD space, games, CD space Doom, Doom.exe. Fire up that Doom, except Doom doesn't work on a 286. Let's not to be too technically geeky here, but Doom doesn't run on a 286. You need at least a 386 or a 486 to run Doom. But I'm just saying, at the DOS command prompt, dir/p to list all the files in that directory, but go a page at a time. Remember that? Remember using the DOS command prompt? There's something therapeutic and glorious. You feel like Neo from the Matrix hacking away. You're doing simple things in MS-DOS. You're doing things that you used to do in the 90s. WIN, enter, and it boots into Windows 3.1. But I like going back. And here's the thing. Going back to vintage computers, retro computing, you would think that community is stuck in the 80s, stuck in the 90s, maybe go all the way back to the 70s. You punch cards, you got to compute. No one has, I imagine there's most people out there do not, there's almost nobody out there with a punch card computer. A computer that's the size of a living room. What is a video? I saw a picture recently. It's like 5 or 6 dudes pushing a giant, huge filing cabinet looking thing up into the belly of an aircraft. And the caption was, what 5 megabytes look like in 1967 or something like that. It's crazy. Here's the world's first hard disk, and it's literally 3 feet in diameter. This is 1 megabyte. It's crazy. That's probably a little bit more than 1 megabyte, but you get what I'm saying. We are retro computing enthusiasts. I'm speaking for retro computing enthusiasts. You might think that they're stuck in the 70s, 80s, 90s, that they don't have any interest in newfangled Windows 10, and there's no way a retro computer enthusiast, dude, guy, gal, lady, whatever, is going to have any interest in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 because it can't run on their 386 Packard Bell. They're using their Microsoft Flight Simulator 4.0, damn it, and they are happy with it. They don't need this newfangled photogrammetry and a high bandwidth internet connection at all times and photorealism. No. See, the exact opposite is true. There's virtually, because I can't speak for everybody, but there is virtually no such thing as a retro computing enthusiast who isn't on the bleeding edge also of modern computing technology. I virtually guarantee you that if you talk to somebody who is talking up a storm about their old IBM 5150, they scored a 5150, they found one at an estate sale or whatever, and they got it for $50 and it's $1,000 on eBay and all this stuff, a great score. They just installed DOS 3. Whatever on their IBM 5150, and they have 512 kilobytes of RAM, and they just got a RAM expansion board, an ISA expansion board. They'll talk about all that, but I promise you, if you switch their gears a little bit, they will tell you all about their state-of-the-art Ryzen 9 3950X 16-core 32-thread computer. Maybe they have a Threadripper. Maybe they're 64 cores, 128 Threadrippers, and they've got their RTX 2080 Ti or their Titan, or they're excited about the new NVIDIA 3000 series graphics cards coming out. They've got 120 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM running at 4.5 gigahertz. They know the bleeding edge. They'll tell you what version of Windows 10, what update they're on at Windows 10, what updates sucked, and what glitches with the new update. retro computing enthusiasts, just because they like those old computers and they're geeks and hobbyists with those old computers, doesn't mean that they're stuck there. They are some of the most knowledgeable people about modern PCs in the entire world. That's kind of where I fall into. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on either. I'm an enthusiast of both. Often, my 286E, my 286 computer, the compact, sits right on the same desk beside my Ryzen 9 computer, my 12-core, 24-thread 3900X computer that I play Flight Simulator 2020 on. I got that computer running to a 70-inch TV on the wall. That's what I use for a monitor with that computer. It is as ridiculous as it sounds. Right below that TV is my 17-inch, I think it's an HP CRT that I have the 286 running on with Windows 3.1 or whatever I'm dabbling with down there at the same time. You know, I've got the 787 Dreamliner and cruise control halfway over the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, I'm going to let that run while I go down to the bottom screen and click away in MS-DOS 6.22 on my 286 computer. The biggest reason, this is all I'm getting at here, the biggest reason, and I think I speak for a lot of geeks, no matter what the technology, whether it's computers or old RC aircraft that you're still using, nitro? Whatever fuel you're using, you're heating up that glow plug and you're cranking that propeller. You're sitting there at the airfield at the RC Fest, cranking a propeller, putting a drill, electric cordless drill on your propeller to start the engine, while everyone around you is cranking up their lithium-ion battery-packed electric airplanes, and you're just... When you use old stuff, especially old technology, the main reason we like to do so is because it's all part of it. It makes us truly appreciate what we have now, for the most part. It makes us remember dial-up internet and yelling downstairs to your parents or other family members, "Don't pick up the phone, I'm trying to play a death match in Doom with Nathan." And inevitably, despite you yelling that downstairs, you're halfway through an online multiplayer match on Duke Nukem or something like that, and you hear a little voice coming out of the back of your computer. It's your mom picking up the phone. "What's this noise? What's this noise on the phone? Somebody on the computer?" You remember? Because modems had that little speaker so you could hear it dialing out. Beep, boop, burr. Well, if someone else in the house picked up the phone, you could hear their voice coming through the phone line in the back of your computer, and you're just like, "Oh, please, no, don't screw up my connection." Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. But using old technology, it's not just a nostalgia thing. I mean, of course, a lot of it is nostalgia. But it gives you a full appreciation of where we've come from and where we are. It also gives you an appreciation, possibly, somewhat, in some cases, where we had it right back then, in this instance, and got it. Where along the line did we get it so terribly wrong in between MS-DOS 1.0 and the latest broken patch from Windows 10? You just appreciate it more, and it helps the tech community keep the rest of the tech community accountable. Like the retro tech community keeps the modern tech community accountable because we see it. I can go back to the 286 and see how we progressed to a 12-core 3900X Ryzen processor. You can see it along the way. It makes you appreciate so much more. And I can only speak for myself, but let's talk about more geekiness coming back. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. In the last segment, I was reminiscing and regaling you with why we in the retro tech community appreciate retro tech and why we are so deeply invested in the bleeding edge modern technology as well. Going back to the retro tech makes you appreciate what we have now, but also helps you keep modern tech accountable. We had it right back then. This function, prefer performed perfectly in 1988. Somehow over the last 32 years, we've screwed it up to where it barely operates in Windows 10, just for an example. It makes you appreciate what we have and makes you keep what we have accountable, if that makes any sense. I was reminded during the break, which was instant for me, but probably 4 or 5 minutes for you. All the more reason why you should download the podcast, Geek Therapy Radio Podcast. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme. I was reminded during the break of another good analogy of how old technology can help you out with modern technology. And we are going to get into the geek realm of photography here. And you probably already know where I'm going at the mere mention of photography. Nowadays, and this is not a complaint because inherently it's an amazing thing. My phone has 300 something gigs in it. I can take thousands upon thousands upon thousands of uncountable tens and hundreds of thousands of pictures on my phone. If you have a digital camera, if you have a DSLR camera, and you have a 512 gigabyte SD card in there, that the SD card, the micro SD card, is no bigger than your pinky nail, 512 gigs, or 256 gigs, even 128 gigs, whatever, you can take thousands upon thousands upon thousands of the most pristine, precise, ultra high resolution digital pictures you can imagine. But that means that by and large, 99 out of 100 pictures you take are going to be lifeless and soulless. And I don't mean that in any sort of audiophile kind of, cassettes sound better than CDs or records sound better than lossless FLAC files. I don't mean it like that. So in terms of photography, we're talking film versus digital. And you might think, well, film inherently just looks better. It has more character to it because of the inherent qualities of film. It makes flesh tones look better right out of the box. Then it's harder to get flesh tones right in digital. Blah, blah, blah. And that's true. There's a feel that you get with film that cannot be intrinsically reproduced with digital. I get that. What I'm getting at, though, is the amount of pictures you can take with film versus digital. With film, let's just say ballpark, you could take 24 shots per roll. And I'm just talking about regular 35 millimeter film here. You can take, give or take, 24 shots per roll. And each roll of film is at a certain ISO. So if you're outdoors, it would say ISO, a good all-around film would probably be ISO 400. Outdoor film, specifically outdoor, would show like people playing soccer is what you want on a sunny day, and that would be ISO 100. Indoor film, if you're going to be at a party, would be ISO 800, maybe a little more than that. But all I'm getting at is it was 24 shots at a set and specific exposure. There's a saying that limits breed creativity. So, yes, while it's amazing that you can take 100,000 pictures with your modern DSLR in 8K resolution, even more than that, actually, you aren't going to be as creative as you would be with only 24 shots because you had to make those 24 shots count, which means it forced the photographer to use his or her eye and creativity much more acutely. They aren't just going to take a picture of a flower because it's there and they have their phone and they can take hundreds of thousands of pictures of flowers all day long. It doesn't matter. I'm guilty of this. Take a picture with your phone you'll never look at again. Versus when you had 24 shots on a film roll, you couldn't wait to get it back from Walgreens or the film developer and see what you got. But the limit in the film, the limit in shots that you can take, makes you think about the composition of the image more, makes you think about lighting more, makes you think, is this worth taking a picture of? And I would wager that you have way more, a much better chance of getting a good shot by being limited in how many shots you can take versus the odds of taking a good shot with a modern camera, because I can take 1,000 pictures of this rose petal. It doesn't matter. And I don't mean that in any sort of negative way. And I find myself trying to remind myself, I am an amateur photographer. I like to do astrophotography, for instance. But when I have the camera and I'm thinking about taking a classy looking picture or what I'm taking a picture of, I try to put myself back in. Remember, I try to put myself back when I was like 12 years old and I had one of those disposable 35 millimeter cameras. I just imagine that I can't take 240,000 pictures. I can only take 24. I put myself in that mindset. What if I'm taking a picture here? What if this is the last frame of the roll? What if this is number 24 on that dial and I have to make this one count? Being an extremely amateur photographer, putting myself in that mind space helps to take a better picture, or at the very least increases the odds of that picture looking better than it would have if I just knelt down real quick and took 10 shots of it because I have 100,000 more left on this memory card. Does that make sense? I'm picturing a person driving around right now, or they've got the radio on in their garage and they're thinking, where's my old camera? I remember taking pictures with that old 35 millimeter Nikon back in 1985 at the Grand Canyon. Where's that? Whatever happened to that camera? Maybe you're that person. And since I have you captivated, if you're hearing my voice right now on the AM radio and you are digging what I'm saying at all, that means I do have you captivated. The point of Geek Therapy Radio is for you to hear what I just mentioned, think about that old camera or photography in general, and hopefully spark you a little bit to get back into it. We are so divided nowadays. There's so much stress, and I'm not talking just about 2020 in general, and that as of recording, there's 2 hurricanes on the way to Gulf Coast. I'm talking politically, we're divided. There's so much stress going on in our country right now that I highly encourage you to dust off that old film camera or pick up whatever camera you have and get back into creative photography. And it can be any hobby as well. You can be inspired by an Andy Warhol painting and try your hand at painting something similar, whatever it is. Embrace a hobby. We are all geeks about something, so find your geek thing or remember what it was before the world beat it out of you. At some point, we grew up and we were told the lie that you need to put childish things away. Well, it depends what childish thing. Childish wonder and creativity, don't ever put that away. Put down those paints. You're never going to use it when you grow up. Well, now you're an old fuddy-duddy who's pissed off and hates the world. What's the last creative thing you've done? And I'm not being condescending. I'm asking in general. Rhetorical question. What's the last thing you created for yourself? We ingest and consume so much that rots our soul. What have you put out into the world to add a little bit of color to it? That's the point of hobbies. It's not to escape or ignore the world, but it's so that you can add to the health of your spirit, if that makes sense. Add to the health of your soul. Do something for yourself. Anyways, that's going to be it for the show. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Find the podcast in your favorite podcast app. Just look for the red, white, and black color scheme. GeekTherapyRadio.com for more information. You are worthy of love, both giving and receiving love, and you're worthy of your own self-respect and your own self-confidence. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next week.